everyone. Today we are going to be making a needle felted garland, and we're going to learn some about wool and how to do needle felting. In your kit you have a bunch of pieces of fluff. This is wool, like from a sheep. You have, I think, 3 colors, maybe 4 in yours. I have some little bits and ends. And you can decide which colors you want to use for which pieces of your garland in just a minute. We're going to make some acorns and we're going to make some leaves. Alright, now you can see if you pull on your wool like I'm doing here, you can see it kind of separates out into lots of little hairs. And the cool thing about wool, and the reason that it will turn into felt, is that the hairs have little barbs on them, or little scales, and we are going to encourage those scales to kind of hook into each other and hold on. It's kind of like Velcro, but more permanent. You can really only do this with wool. Wool has the right structure to do this with. If you tried to do it with, say, a piece of felt from the craft store, unless it's wool felt, that won't work. So just a heads up, to do this you have to use wool. You can't use like cotton balls or things like that. Underneath here I have some foam that is especially for needle felting. You don't need anything this fancy. I think I put on the sheet that you would need some styrofoam. You can use some recycled styrofoam. You can use foam like this if you have some lying around. You can also use a clean, dry kitchen sponge if you'd like to get started. Those are all perfectly acceptable things to use. You just want something that's relatively smooth, and you want something that is not going to let the fibers sink down into it. You also have in your kit some needles. You have 3 sizes: a small, a medium, and a large. And you can tell the difference. Let me grab another size here. You can tell the difference based on how kind of thick they are. And that also will tell you what you're doing. So like this one's a large and this one's a small, and the small is not only shorter than the large. If you look closely, you can see that the large is wider than the small. That means that the small is going to be better for very fine details. The large is going to be better for things like outlines and getting started and making big basic shapes. And the medium is going to be best for most of what you're doing. I am going to actually work with a medium the whole time. I think that is easier, and we're not doing anything super duper big, but you can choose which size feels right to you for which part. I've also made myself a stencil of a leaf. You might want to use something that's a little bit simpler. This is a very jaggedy stencil with a lot of details, so probably I'm going to lose a lot of these details when I make my leaf, and that's okay with me. But if you don't want to waste the time cutting out something like that, you can always cut out like an oak leaf or something that's a little bit simpler. What are some other things you should know? Oh, felting needles, super duper sharp. So be careful, because you're going to be kind of stabbing with them a lot. So watch out for your fingers. You don't want to stab yourself with them. Also, because they get so narrow down here at the point, you want to go straight up and down while you're felting. Don't go in at an angle, because if you pull up wrong, that will snap your needle, and that's no good. You also don't want to try to like rearrange the fibers with the needle. Like if you've got something that's over here and you want it over here, don't try to drag it with the needle. That can also break it. If you have a toothpick or a knitting needle, or I have a little piece of wire actually that I use, you can use that. You can also use tweezers if you want to add like really fine little details. That's fine. So what I'm gonna do for my leaf, I don't want it to be all one solid color because I don't feel like that's very realistic. I'm gonna mix a couple of my colors together, and the way I'm doing this is I'm just grabbing the very ends and I'm holding this kind of loosely back here, and I'm just pulling. You don't want to cut your fibers because that can make them too short to work with, and you don't want to grab really tight and just yank, because you'll end up with sizes you don't want. You can then take your colors and kind of mix them by pulling them apart like that and putting them back together, and that'll kind of start to mix up the fibers. If you do this for a really long time, you'll end up with kind of a muddy, all the colors mixed together. I want some patches of each color, so I'm just gonna do it a couple of times, and you can still see I've got some stripes of yellow and green in there, and it's mostly orange. So what I'm gonna do now is take my clump here. We're gonna make a leaf first, and I'm going to lay some on my mat under my stencil, and I'm just gonna poke all along the edges. And what this is going to do eventually is tangle up these fibers so much that the scales on the wool will blend together and hook together, and it will all hold itself together. This is the kind of thing that takes a while. So have an audiobook or a movie or a podcast or something to listen to while you're doing this. And I am going to go all the way around the outline of this, just straight up and down. And I'm not stabbing super hard or going super far into my foam. I don't really need to do that. I just need to go in deep enough to poke all the way through the wool. So you can see it's kind of getting smoother, and all of the little fuzzy flyaway bits of my wool are starting to kind of clump down and meld together. I'm gonna add another layer over here in the corner because I ran out. You can always add more to what you're felting. It's harder to take things away, so start with a little bit. You can also do this if you have leaf-shaped cookie cutters. That would be really cool, because what you can do is put the wool down inside the cookie cutter and felt it down in the cookie cutter, and that kind of keeps you from having to do this next step I'm going to show you. Alright, and make sure to pay a lot of attention to the edges. It's tempting to pay most of your attention to the middle, but you want to pay a lot of attention to the edges, and I will show you why. So when I pick this up, it's hard to see on the video, but I can see where the outline of my leaf is, and I'm going to just take this stuff that's outside of that outline and fold it down and in. Fold it in, fold it in, fold it in. And I will put my stencil on top again. And felt all those ends into the middle. Stab, 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 stabby, stab, 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 stabby, stab, 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 stab. And you can decide how tightly packed you want it to be. It's going to hold up better to being handled and moved around if you do a lot of felting. It's going to be a little bit, and it's going to be smoother. It's going to be fuzzier with very little felting and fluffier. So probably for these, you'll want to go at it for a while. Alright, I have my basic shape, and here I'm going to pull that in a little bit, and you can kind of adjust the edges like this by saying, oh no, I want this very little bit right here. I want to take it, and I'm going to take my toothpick or my needle or whatever, not my felting needle, my other needles, and pull it down and kind of felt so that it stays. And you'll see that this is starting to get more and more like a leaf as we go. Now, if I wasn't doing this as a video, I'm going to be honest, I would work some more on cleaning this up and felting it down. But I think what I want to do now is I want to make it a little bit thicker because I can still see some of the pad through this, which means it's still pretty thin. So I'm going to add some more little pieces anywhere that I think it's really thin, and just kind of felt those on so that this is a thicker, wider shape. I want my point to stay there. Ta-da. Okay. And what looks like a lot of wool kind of can become very small as you felt it. That is okay. Got some ASMR stuff going on with this little ch-ch-ch sound that the needle makes. Alright, add a little more floof. Add a little more. Yeah. See, that was too much. Add a little more floof. More floof. Alright, and as you can see, I could keep messing with this all day. You can do as much or as little detail work as you want. You can work on those edges until they're really crisp and neat. You can do kind of what I'm doing here, which is leave it a little bit fuzzier. It's up to you. By the way, this is called dry felting. Sometimes when you do felting, you need water, especially hot water. This is a different kind of felting. So if you look up more complicated directions later for more complicated projects, make sure you look for needle felting or dry felting and not wet felting. All right, that is a pretty good leaf shape. I like it. Now the last thing I want to do is add some little details. I want to add some veins to it and a stem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a contrasting-ish color. I'm going to use this purple, and I'm going to take this and roll it, pull it out thin and kind of roll it between my hands. And when I do that, you can see I'm starting to get kind of a little string. That's going to be our veins and our stem. There we go. So that's a little bit felted already just from the heat of your hands and from rubbing it. I'm going to break that into 2 pieces for now. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to lay the thicker end down. That's going to be my stem. And I'm going to go up a little ways with this bit, and then I'm going to angle it off to the side the way that a leaf kind of has those veins going through it. And I can always, if it's too long like this, I can always take it and fold it back, felt it down in a nice little line. You might want to felt the stem a little bit. Just to get it to stick together and make sure that you're really getting it attached there. I'm going to take this other bit and I'm going to make this vein going this way. You don't want to go all the way to the edges of your leaf, just a little ways to give kind of the idea. And then go stabby, stabby, stabby this way. And if you really have extra, you can always fold it back and go the other way with it, or you can trim off the very, very end once you're done felting it together. There you go. That ended up a little bit more square than I wanted it to. Luckily, I haven't felted it all the way down yet, and I can peel it up kind of carefully and make it more angled and more like a leaf vein and less like a T. There we go. Ta-da! That looks pretty good. All right, just make sure that the rest of this is really going to hold together. And the last thing I'm going to do is very carefully take this and peel it up off of my mat. And the reason that you don't want to stab too far down is because it can make it really hard to get it off of your mat. I'm going to take this and flip it over, and I'm going to felt down the other side a little bit because the other side is still really fuzzy and fluffy. You can add veins to the other side if you'd like, or you can leave it just on one side. That's up to you. I'm not going to do that because I feel like you've watched me make this leaf for long enough. So there you go. There you have it. There's my leaf. And it's not my best leaf I've ever made, but I think it looks pretty cute. You can kind of pull and zhuzh and adjust your leaf if you need to. Twist your stem up a little bit more. Whatever you need to do to make it feel more like a leaf. So there's your leaf. And to make the next bit, to go kind of between your leaves on your garland, I'm going to make a ball. You could also make these into acorns by going out in your yard and finding some acorn caps and just gluing an acorn cap onto this. It's so easy. So what you're going to do, you're going to take a pretty good sized chunk of your wool. You're going to roll it into a ball. I think I want mine to be a little bit bigger than that, so I'll add some more. And remember when you're making these that these are going to get smaller as you work with them. So if you get something and you're like, yes, that is the exact right size, make it a little bit bigger while it's still fluffy. Then you're going to take your needle and you're going to stab again. And this time, since we're not making something flat, we're making something round, you want to be turning your wool. And this is where you want to be really careful with your fingers not to stab yourself, and to be very, very careful with your fingers. If this makes you nervous, a cool tip I've seen is to take a piece of cardboard. Do I have a small enough one? So I have this cardboard that was the piece of a piece of a label. Just gonna cut it square. You fold it and you hold your wool using the cardboard. Oop, that's slippery. Don't use the slippery side, use the flat side, and then you can stab like that and you're less likely to poke through and hit your fingers. You also aren't going to have quite as much control over your wool as if you're using your fingers, but be very careful. You don't have to stab hard, it's the repeating of the stabbing, not how hard you do it. So I can stab pretty gently, and as long as I'm doing it over and over and over and over and over, this is going to turn into a little felt ball, and it's going to be really cute. And you can see, just like with our leaf, the longer you felt at it, the smoother it's going to be. And if you do this a very short time, it's not going to be as firm or as smooth. It's going to be kind of more rough and bumpy. Just kind of keep working, and since this is a sphere, any bits that stick up or stick out, you want to kind of put in, and you want to go at this from every angle. Just make sure you're going straight in and straight out. Don't go in and then lift like this, or go in at an angle and then lift, because that's going to break your needle. All right. There you go. So you have got enough wool in your bag to make a bunch of little beads, and you can always also shape it a little by rolling it in your hands, I should have said. You can make a bunch of beads and a bunch of cute leaves. What I would then do with these is either turn your stems into a little loop and string them onto a piece of twine, which I think we gave you, to make a little garland, or you can put these in a little bowl and make a little a little fall decoration. They're really fun. There are lots of directions online if you have extra wool. There are lots of directions online for making cute animals and flowers and other shapes. Have fun. Enjoy needle felting. Don't stab yourself. And I will see you next time.